आपका स्वागत है। तेंजिन जी हिंदी बोल सकता है, तो हिंदी इंग्लिश हिंदी आप लोगों के लिए ये टिबेट की जो मीडिया मूवमेंट हुई उसके बारे में आज हम बात करेंगे, क्योंकि ज़्यादातर ये बातें मीडिया में आती नहीं है और इसके बारे में चर्चा भी बहुत कम होती है। तेंजिन से भी मेरी मुलाकात 15-20 दिन पहले एक्सीडेंट की और उसके साथ ये बात करने में मुझे लगा कि एक पर्सन जो इस तरह की स्ट्रगल में इन्वॉल्व है और जिस तरह से तो मैंने भी समझने के लिए कि लड़ाई क्या है, कैसे ट्रेनिंग देनी है, इसके लिए उसको नोटिस किया। ऐसे प्रोग्राम हम लोगों ने इंसान प्रशांत और यूनिवर्सिटी की तरफ से आयोजित किया है। तेंजिन का थोड़ा परिचय, क्योंकि मैंने भी यहाँ पर पढ़ के थोड़ा सुना है, तो पोइट भी है, एक्टिविस्ट भी है, टीचर के साथ धर्मशाला में रहता है। उसके माता पिता अक्षय लोग के यहाँ से यहाँ भी और दुनिया में जाएगा किस तरह से अभी वो बता रहा था कि करीब 2 लाख लोग टिबेट के बाहर हैं। 1.5 लाख मोदी भी तो वो नेपाल, भूटान, इंडिया, ज़्यादातर इंडिया में ये कंट्रीज है और बड़े इंसानों भी हैं। तेंजिन पहली बार जब लाइफ में आया 2002 में, जब चाइना के प्रीमियर जी आए थे मुंबई के होटल में और वहाँ पे मीटिंग कर रहे थे, तब वो बाहर से वो होटल का रिपेयरिंग चल रहा था, तो जो लगाते हैं बाहर रिपेयरिंग के लिए वहाँ से चढ़ के उसको टिकट चल रहा वो चौकी मूर्ति पर लगाया था उनकी यूट्यूब के बाहर, और तब मीडिया ने टेलीविजन में काफ़ी उसको कवरेज किया था और तब से वो एक तरह से काफ़ी जाना माना नाम बन गया है। गुजरात बार बार भी आता है। एक इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ ये है कि इन लोगों का इंटरेस्टिंग जो है ये एक्चुअली नॉन वायलेंस मूवमेंट चला है। तो नॉन वायलेंस उनका एक बेसिक ये है कि जिसके थ्रू वो लोग ये पूरी मूवमेंट चला रहे हैं और करीब 49 से भी मूवमेंट शुरू हुई है। 59 में दलाई लामा और इन लोगों ने यहाँ पे इंडिया में आए और यहाँ पे उनको शरण दी गई। तो तब से, क्योंकि शुरू के दौर में वो ज़्यादा बात करेंगे, लेकिन शुरू के दौर में यूनाइटेड नेशंस काफ़ी इंटरेस्ट ले रहा है इस सवाल में, क्योंकि इसमें अमेरिका की भूमिका रही है, वो सब बाद में बात करेंगे। तो वो अमेरिका की भूमिका की वजह से भी पूरा अभी उनका स्ट्रगल का एक स्टैंड बदल गया है, क्योंकि थोड़ा अमेरिका चाइना की तरफ जा रहा है और ये सब इंटरनेशनल डेवलपमेंट है, तो इसकी वजह से भी नया पॉलिटिकल एंगल इसमें आया है। तो ज़्यादा बात पूरी तरह वो अच्छा है और बाद में हमें कोई सवाल पूछे इसके बारे में बातचीत करेंगे। ये उसका एक कहानी और कविताओं का संग्रह है, उसके एक कलेक्शन को कोई अवार्ड भी दिया ये पैसे के लिए मैं इंग्लिश में पढ़ देता हूँ। My kind of exile was a major Indian literary prize for expressing the tragedy of being a Tibetan in this world. तो इसको इंडियन गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से प्राइज भी उसके किताब को दिया, ऐसे को मिला था। और ये छोटा सा कलेक्शन अभी इसमें पब्लिश हुआ है और सब तेंजिन के प्रकार की वो बात हुई है। किसमें कंफर्टेबल है आपको, इंग्लिश में हिंदी?
And you alternate which you two are comfortable.
मेरी हिंदी में वो जेंडर नहीं करता है, करती है, वो जेंडर नहीं। तीसरी भाषा जो मेरा मातृभाषा उसमें जेंडर नहीं, और मेरी दूसरी भाषा जो बॉम्बे की हिंदी है उसमें भी जेंडर नहीं। आप अगर वाकिफ हो बॉम्बे की हिंदी, उसमें औरतें बोलो या कोई भी सब करता है, और कोई करते नहीं है बॉम्बे में। तो I'm grateful to Dhiren Bhai and Father Satrik and also Prashant having me here and having this opportunity to speak to all of you. It has always been my attempts to speak to a larger number of Indian audience to talk about Tibet and also to connect to Indians. जो हमारे संघर्ष जो है जितनी ज़्यादा लोगों को बताएं, उनको समझाएं और ये कोशिश इम्पोर्टेंट है क्योंकि ज़्यादातर इंडियंस भारतीयवासी दूर की बात है, हिमालय की पूरी बेल्ट के बारे में कुछ पता ही नहीं। और अभी तो मैं आपके सामने हूँ तो हिरन भाई बोला कि ये तिब्बतन तेंजिन अगर मैं आप कोई भी अगर आप मुझे मिले रास्ते में तो ज़्यादातर लोग मुझे समझेंगे ये कोई नेपाली है या चाइनीज़ है और या कोई नॉर्थ ईस्ट का कोई है। एंड there hasn't been a single day outside Dharamshala where I'm not called Chinky, Ching Chong, Bagu, Nepali, and being Tibetan and being so grateful to India and the Indians, I'm never left with any courage to demand that I should be known as a never. कभी ये नहीं लगा कि मेरी भी एक पहचान एक औकात रहे कि मैं अपने आप को एक तिब्बती मना लूँ कोई। So instead of being angry or agitated, I go up to the person and I shake hands and say to him, आपको पता है कि भारत इतना बड़ा इंडिया 120 करोड़ की आबादी है और कितने लोगों की भाषाएं अलग है, रिलीजन और हमारे जैसे चेहरे को मारने से लेकर बहुत सारे ऐसे मौके पे कभी ये नहीं लगता कि अगर मैं तिब्बती में बारे में बोलूँ तो वो समझेंगे। पहले उनको ये समझ में आ रहा है कि ऐसे चेहरे भी बहुत सारे भारतीय। अभी मैं तिब्बत की समस्या के बारे में सीधा चाहता हूँ और इसके बारे में थोड़ा बोल लेता हूँ। When we talk about Tibet, it is not just a small country. There was a friend of mine who I studied with in Bombay University. I did MA from Bombay University. And once a friend of mine called from Bombay and said that he was going to Darjeeling, and he wanted to come to meet me the next day in Dharamshala. I live in Dharamshala, which is he said he wanted to come and meet me. I was wondering how was he going to come in Dharamshala the next day from Darjeeling. He said, भाई साहब आपको पता भी है कि दार्जिलिंग और हिमाचल प्रदेश धर्मशाला के बीच में पूरा बिहार और यूपी पड़ता है, आपको पता है? नहीं आप लोग साथ में है ना, इधर उधर हम आ रहे हैं तुमको मिलने। So I was thinking there's no imagination of even the map of India. बस हिमाचल प्रदेश उधर है जो जम्मू कश्मीर के नीचे है और उसके बाद तो ईस्ट में जाए तो पूरा यूपी पड़ेगा, उसके बिहार पड़ेगा, उसके बाद दार्जिलिंग प्रोजेक्ट आएगा जो कि नॉर्थ बंगाल में। And somebody who has an MA degree has no idea of India. So therefore, it is difficult to demand to have any knowledge of Tibet. Partly, it is our own fault. You know, we are 150,000 Tibetans, 150,000 Tibetans. Our fault in not able to, in the span of 55 years, not able to explain the issue of Tibet. At the same time, the issue of Tibet has not been celebrated, and also in media. What sells in media goes up. And just now, a very dear friend just walked in, Dr. Jyotikar ji has been campaigning for Tibet from 1959. when nobody knew about Tibet in India. But then there are people like him and some other friends I have in Bombay with me talking about Tibet in India from that time, ever since His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans came to Tibet and started living in the Asta refuges. The issue of Tibet in India didn't start from the Dalai Lama coming in the new phase started to happen only after English independence. In the year 1947, when India regained its independence, the government of Tibet the government of India at the time to declare India's status of being an independent country, India called what is called Asian Relations Conference. In it, all the independent countries in South Asia, they came together in the presence of Mahatma Gandhi. At that time, Tibet was represented by the finance secretary, and he came and he represented. So in 1947, there was the recognition of Tibet as an independent country. 1948 was a year which saw Tibet and India sharing equal status of being independent countries. And in 1949, when Mao Zedong's communist campaign won him the seat, and when People's Republic of China was formed, then the invasion of Tibet happened. Invasion of Tibet was not just in isolation, it was also happening that Mao Zedong's campaign led to annexation of Inner Mongolia, East Turkestan, and Manchuria. So 4 neighboring countries were annexed and became part of People's Republic of China. And Mao Zedong created this republic with a basic strategy of creating a republic based on Lenin's idea of creating a socialist republic, where nationalities could come together with the common goal of having one republic, without really asking or having the agreement of the people of those countries. So Mongolia came under military invasion of the communist China. East Turkestan leaders were called to have a negotiation with Mao Zedong in Beijing. An aircraft left East Turkestan and crashed before it landed in Beijing. So all the important leaders of East Turkestan, which was Islamic country, independent, came under Beijing's rule. It was only Tibet which resisted. So the freedom struggle started with militant armed resistance. Most Tibetans were farmers and nomads. They were politically unaware of outside, any kind of freedom movement outside. And Tibetans lived in isolation. For how many years? Tibetans at that time did not know of the First World War. Tibetans in Tibet did not know of the Second World War also. And Tibetans, because we did not join any of the wars, we said, we do not want to be part of any other campaign. So Tibetans didn't join the United Nations. And that really left us aloof and isolated, although independent. So therefore, in 1949, when China invaded Tibet, when we asked for help, at that time independent India, United Nations, United Kingdom, and the United States, none of them came to help. Because we had earlier kept ourselves aloof and isolated. So in that way, Tibet was left to fight its own battle, and Tibetans did fight. Because Tibet is on that plateau which is 4,000 meters above sea level, which is 4 kilometers up in the sky. That kind of a high topography plateau up in the sky. Because of that high topography and difficult planning which the Chinese couldn't really deal with. They took 9 years to consolidate their control of Tibet, where they very quickly annexed East Turkestan and Inner Mongolia and Manchuria. Today, when we talk about China, we're talking about 8.6 billion square kilometers of land, while India's total area is 3.2 million square kilometers. And the population is almost the same. But then out of this 8.6 million square kilometers of land, 60% of that Chinese landmass is occupied. It includes the land of the Mongolians, the East Turkestan, Uyghur people, and the Tibetans and the Manchus. And in this 60% of China's landmass, the big country that we're talking about, 60% of that landmass is occupied country, and there the population of local people doesn't even amount to 50 million. Out of 1.3 billion, not even 50 million of the people compose or become a part of the 1.3 billion. So most of the 1.3 billion population is Chinese, not the population of occupied countries. And these occupied countries are sparsely populated, big territory, rich with natural resources, and therefore China is brutally maintaining its rule over these countries. What is called now post-colonial era in India and Africa, Tibet is still reeling under the same colonial era. What is celebrated in Asia and Africa as the post-colonial era, it is not. Colonialism, imperialism has just shifted spaces. And because now India and Africa are benefiting from China's trade, Indians and Africans are unable to recognize the colonization which they suffered, which is now going on other people. And this is the changing scenario. Indians were saying this is colonization when the British invaded and ruled this country for almost about 200 years. And the Indians were telling everybody this is colonization. We are being subjugated. Our riches of India was being taken away by the British. We were telling everybody. But today what is happening in Tibet is not seen, heard, recognized. The problem is less about people's analysis. The problem is more about the insulation that has been coming because of media. And media's biasness is because of the celebrity. What sells is what the media has been presenting. Media sells things that immediately benefit or that titillate or that cater to instant gratification, which is part of the organization. So therefore, real issues of human rights that we are talking about either in Tibet or India or many other places, I'm sure I see in front of me a number of people who are involved in so many other social justices. You also face the same problem. It's not just because of Tibet. You also face the same problem because the media sells what is of instant gratification and is part of an industry. So therefore, the common alliance we make as freedom fighters of Tibet, of human rights in India or various other places, is how do we then create either alternative media or present the issue through such kind of media. So therefore, the issue of Tibet today is how China is constantly maintaining its imperialistic control over Tibet, its natural resources, and because the 60% of China's landmass is the richness of China, this is the secrecy of China's चीप मेक इन चाइना प्रोडक्ट्स। अभी अभी हम घर बैठ के हम चाय पी रहे थे, तभी हम हमारे बातों में जिक्र आया कि भारत में आज गणपति की एक मूर्ति भी चाइना से आई, दिवाली की पटाखे वहां से आए। और हैरान होने की बात क्या है कि तिब्बत में संघर्ष चल रहे हैं, क्योंकि ये राष्ट्रीय झंडा जो मेरी छाती पे यहाँ लगा हूँ, ये झंडा चीन लोगों को पता नहीं है क्या है, लेकिन वहां ये भी वहां बनता है चीन। दिस इज द ब्लाइंडनेस हाउ randomly mass production. So in that way, we actually see where the violence is. The humongous structural violence that the Tibetans are undergoing and occupied countries. At least in the case of Tibet, there is Holiness the Dalai Lama as the ambassador, and all the Tibetans outside to speak about Tibet in the international community, especially here in India. So as much as the wealth of Tibet that goes on into India, into China, in creating the cheap made in China products, partly the secrecy of this profitable made in China products is also the slave labor issue. Unfortunately, it is the people of China who are having to pay for the riches which is now being shared between Chinese dictators and the Western corporate companies. It's not China's wealth, it's not Chinese people's wealth. It is the Chinese people who are being enslaved by their own leaders. And these leaders have their wealth stashed up in Western countries, including today's President of China, Xi Jinping, the former Prime Minister of China, Wen Jiabao. New York Times and The Guardian have exposed them. Bloomberg has exposed them having their wealth in billions of dollars worth stashed up outside in their countries, and then being in China and presenting themselves as leader of China. But it's the people of China who are having to pay. They work for a very, very little wage. Unfortunately, in China there is no labor rights, labor unions who work for people. It doesn't mean there isn't labor union. In China, the labor unions are there, but these labor unions are installed by the government so that laborers do not create a union on their own, so that they do not cause sabotage. In India, laborers' rights are protected and maintained defensively by the laborers. So labor unions can actually create a strike and create India Band. In China, not possible. It's not even possible there in China because labor unions watch over the people. वहाँ का रोल लेबर यूनियन का रोल अलग उल्टा है. The labor union works for the government to watch over the people. So the people have no right whatsoever. अगर किसी की काम करते समय हाथ कट गया तो कट गया. So you go to court. And finally you come to a blockade where the court listens to high officials who are there in the Communist Party, which is a single largest political party, one and the only political party who works mostly in the interest of the Chinese dictators. This is the situation. And therefore, nexus between the Western corporate companies and the Chinese dictators constantly create wealth. And therefore, I see that China is the largest slave empire. Unfortunately, almost about 900 million workers in China that compose into making the largest slave empire. It's unbelievable. 2014, right? Everybody is talking about freedom, transparency, but here is an empire without the king. seemingly outwardly all necktie and wine glass bearing officials who are actually running the disastrously the largest slave empire in China. And this is the situation going on, where the natural resources are drawn from these occupied countries and using the slave labor of China, Chinese made cheap made in China products is how it is. China has very successfully created a world of one single narrative, a world which is brutally run with single language, Chinese. Much of the media and the language and any source of information outside are hardly in Chinese. Therefore, they are fed with information only what the government has been feeding the Chinese people. Through the media, through children's education, from school and college, there's only one interpretation of history and world, which is being fed to the Chinese people. And they do not get to access any other information from outside. One is the language barrier. So much of language barrier that in year 2008, during the Beijing 2008 Olympics, because there was a need to cater and host a number of international guests, they had to train 10,000 Chinese in English so that they could treat these international guests in different places. And it's so brutally guarded, the information, that Google, which is considered the father and the mother for those of us who live outside China, anything you want to know, ask Google. भाई साहब बोले, लेकिन वहाँ Google भाई साहब मार खा रहे हैं. Google भाई साहब चाइना में मार खा रहे हैं और Google is complaining. अगर Google has to make a complaint against China and fear China, then हम लोग कहाँ जाएंगे? So such is the sophisticated management of information, where people are being kept under controlled fear. And this is how it's completely staged now. Therefore, in Tibet today, where the natural resources like gold, copper, lithium, petroleum and natural gas in Uzbekistan and Mongolia, uranium in Mongolia. These are the things, natural resources that go into making Chinese cheap made in China products. And when they do this extraction of natural resources, it is the people in those countries who protest. And when they protest, they are brutally killed, jailed, and their friends, family arrested, harassed day in and day out. For a long time, Tibetans have been going out into the street and raising their fists and protests. And it came to a time where such kind of protest is no longer possible. The moment someone comes out in the street, shot to death, blood, everything is cleaned up, after 10 minutes it seems as if nothing. Such kind of security measurements, where every street corner is guarded either with CCTVs or the riot armed police and the military. So such kind of in-the-street kind of protest is not possible now. And therefore, it led to a situation where Tibetans burned themselves, set themselves on fire. This is the last thing we can do.